On Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping in person for the first time since the pandemic. This meeting will take place in Uzbekistan, and there are people in the West that would prefer that these two not be friends. So everyone will be watching this meeting with a microscope. Imagine how badly Western powers would love to put some kind of tracker or something inside of here, right? This is the thing. This is the meeting, guys. We are going to put our ear to the railroad tracks. Is that
to listen? Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on that wall and listen to that meeting.
Now, in the terms of the Cold War, this meeting is red hot because the United States risks being cut out of a lot of money of global currency if these two nations get too chummy. The Cold War, we want to remind you, is all about the default currency, right? What currency does international trade happen on right now? It is the US dollar, but that is by no means a sure thing. It's sort of teetering on the brink. Now, China would very much like to pay for gas and other things from OPEC nations on the petro yuan. I say that wrong all the time. Petro yuan. Russia is now accepting payments for oil and gas on the ruble. So how many other nations will sort of get the idea that they can stop paying currency transfers to pay for all their oil and gas if the U.S. cannot keep its stronghold? Now, incidentally, I've been reading this book. I brought my homework with me. It's called The Hidden Hand of American Hegemony, and it is about how the United States actually won the sort of big prize of being the global currency. The author David Spiro talks about how America got this stronghold to begin with. And he says, I'm going to just give you a little historical context. In 1974, U.S. Treasury Secretary William Simon negotiated a secret deal with the Saudi Central Bank so that they could buy U.S. Treasury securities outside of the normal auction. A few years later, Treasury Secretary Michael Blumenthal cut a secret deal with the Saudis so that OPEC would continue to price oil in dollars. These deals were secret because the United States had promised other industrialized democracies that it would not pursue such unilateral positions. But it happened. In fact, he talks a lot about petrodollar recycling, how the United States continues to make money through. It's a bit complicated, but worth reading. Incidentally, this book is out of print. I had to order it. It's about 15 years old. So, okay. But the West would have you believe that anything that removes the US dollar as the global currency is evil, is nefarious, right? Because this is the way it should be. Listen to this one consultant tell Face the Nation what we need to believe about China.
Let's start with, what is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization?
It's an organization that Russia and China focus on to try to balance power away from the Western world and focus more on their relationship, countries in the region. Some of what they do is benign, but some of it, I would argue, is more nefarious.
Nefarious.
He says that with a little
it's very nefarious. They're getting together, and these guys are going to talk about how they're going to bring down the U.S. dollar. It's nefarious.
Right. To you. I mean, that's another word for undesirable. Right.
Well, and also, can I just say, when you talked about the U.S. dollar and you talked about oil, I mean, what a lot of people don't know is that oil historically has not been volatile because it was tied to gold. And the why oil became so volatile is because it became tied to the dollar.
Yes.
So the U.S. dollar is the fluctuating problem, not oil itself.
Right. It's amazing to me that guy got booked on Face the Nation.
Well, it's not Face the Nation. It was CBS Primetime.
But even so, one of CBS Primetime marquee shows, they book this guy who's a consultancy aimed at helping businesses stop Chinese influence. Like,
did they disclose that?
Well, they
say who he is and what company he works for.
Right.
But they don't say your company specifically hates China. We're going to get a good reference point on you now, so you can provide some context about this meeting between. This is what the Western media does, guys. They don't tell you their connections.
But I worked for CBS. I can't imagine that guy getting booked by any booker that I had ever worked with. I don't know how that happens.
Or do you think it just flies under the radar? Like, we have a guy, he's a consultant for a think tank in Washington.
No, I don't. Because remember, there were some pieces that we did even around CES, which is a consumer electronics show, and there were guests on who also had sponsorship deals, and they had to say, this contributor also has is a spokesperson for Cadillac or whatever.
It was Kodak. It was a Kodak. It was a person who was like getting money from Kodak, and then she was going to come on CBS to talk about cameras, and CBS was like, no. We can't have like a person coming on talking about cameras who's also getting money from Kodak.
So we disclosed it when we brought her on the show, right? So
but that didn't stop them from bringing her on the show. They still brought her on the show. They just had to say that she's a contributor. She's a paid whatever from Kodak.
Who also, even so, just the idea that this guy got this marquee shot to talk about China tells you how... This, to me, that's unconscionable. Okay. So, of course, this guy, he doesn't want Chinese currency to expand its reach. Now, am I saying that it would be better that the yuan is the global currency or the ruble? I'm not saying that. But I am saying that cryptocurrencies and blockchains could make it possible to have no global currency backed by any nation state, which is why I think the West is especially scared of it. This week, the Biden administration released a report saying that crypto mining operations could get in the way of climate change efforts, and that, we're going to have to do something about that. Crypto miners for the planet. Right?
So we got to stop all these carbon emissions for all the crypto mining. So, because
not just because they happen to not like it and it threatens their hegemony, but for the planet. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what is the administration saying? They're saying that crypto miners use a lot of energy.
Right.
And all that energy usage is driving up carbon emissions, and that will kill you, basically. Read their summary here. It says these climate-driven damages include deaths, right? You're going to die
caused by
crypto.
Heat waves. So crypto is causing heat waves?
Loss of forest, homes, and infrastructure, wildfires, flooding, extreme weather events, property loss, damage to roads, bridges, public transit systems, and the energy system, inundation of coastal areas by sea level rise, storm surges, droughts, damage to crops, and other harms of the ecosystem that sustain people. All that will happen if we go to cryptocurrency, right? So this is them establishing...
Dogs and cats lying together.
Right.
Yeah. Mass hysteria.
I'm so glad you didn't talk me into buying that stuff, Clayton.
I know, my God. Property loss, droughts. You would be dealing with a drought if you were a crypto miner. Droughts and famine, wildfires.
Right. Okay, so they're establishing that carbon emissions will harm us all, which is true. Rising carbon emissions will have a net negative effect on humanity. Let's all agree on that. The degree of it, we don't agree on. That's okay, right? We can all say we don't want more damage to the planet. So then should we give the government then the power to choose what stays and what goes and trust that they will make the decision for us all? That's a LOL, right?
Right.
So here we have evidence that they are not doing that. They are choosing winners and losers based on what's good for them and using climate change as an excuse. Here is what they say further, that as of August 2022, published estimates of the total global global electricity usage for crypto assets are between 120 and 240 billion kilowatt hours per year. Now, this is according to published estimates. They didn't do their own analysis. They just this is a wide range. It's double, right? And they're saying this exceeds the total annual electricity usage of many individual countries, like Argentina or Australia. Okay, but one study put out last year of Bitcoin alone shows that Bitcoin uses about 113 billion kilowatt hours. So the government's saying that cryptocurrency in general is between 120 and 240. And this study is saying that Bitcoin alone is about 113. So let's say 240 is an extreme exaggeration, okay? And let's just pretend, for the sake of argument, that it is closer to 120, 150. Fine. How is that electricity consumed? Well, you can see here the energy use comes from the nodes that validate and relay transactions, the pools that coordinate miners' activity around the world, and the mining machines themselves. That's not the one I was. Do you have the chart? That one, yes. So that is a breakdown of how this energy is used, right?
Okay.
But how does that compare to traditional banking?
I mean, like going to Bank of America or
Traditional banking, you got a checkbook, you got a credit card, you got an ATM card, you go to the ATM, right?
I don't know. I'm going to say, let me just take a gander, because if you lived in New York City, you would drive down, you see like the Bank of America building.
Yeah.
You'd see the Citibank building, these massive buildings with electricity and computers and thousands of employees riding elevators and stuff, and banking centers all over, all the ATMs,
Yeah.
right? And brick and mortar banks all over the place. If you want to go to a PNC bank or a Bank of America bank, there's branches everywhere, right? I'm going to say, I don't know, at least on par or maybe even more. Double crypto.
Yes. Traditional banking
Double.
produces about 240 billion kilowatt hours per year compared to our conservative estimates of 120 or 150 for cryptocurrency. Now, this is probably conservative because the banking industry does not report its electricity consumption. They don't have to. The government could give a shit.
Right.
No, the government's not asking. They do not care. They do care about cryptocurrency. That's interesting, right? So traditional banking has to run banking centers, which are, of course, very energy intensive. They also have to run branches, ATMs, card network data centers. They have to collect physical cash in those armored cars. You use a bank, you understand, right? What about gold? Actually, gold is nearly as energy consumptive as banking. Bitcoin, interestingly enough, is about the most eco-friendly way to bank or move your money. But the government cannot control it. They cannot even get a straight read on who owns it. That's the problem.
Right. They want the control. Yes.
Right. In a world where Western leaders like to unbank people when they are dissenters, I'm talking to you, Darth Trudeau, right?
Right.
So to be fair, China doesn't like the idea of cryptocurrency either. Most governments don't. Go ahead, Philip. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, but the difference here is that the government hasn't done a study like this on banks that say banks are going to blow up the world, kill you, you're going to die, you're going to drown, you're going to starve.
Your dog's going to not have food.
So,
right.
Yeah.
They don't have that study, so obviously it's fine.
Yes.
That's just
they don't
Well,
need it.
course,
They
look,
will not call for it.
And look, everyone that works in these administrations comes from Wall Street, right? They're former Goldman Sachs bankers. They're all part of the deep banking state, right? They then become cabinet members inside of these administrations. Or they become Treasury secretaries, or they become Federal Reserve chairmen. It's all one big fraternity or sorority. And there's never going to be a study about this. They're going to actually look at the greenhouse gas emissions of Wall Street. Like I will eat my hat if that ever happens. If they ever do a study on how but here's the thing, they all pay lip service to this idea of ESG. Right?
Yeah.
So that's how they get around this. Like Wall Street preemptively says that we are really advancing ESG, environmental science and governance, and we're really out in front on this. So no, Wall Street, we already police ourselves.
Yeah.
We are already taking care of our own. So you don't need to police us because we've got this ESG metric that we use, which is a total bullshit metric, by the way.
Well, I do think this is sort of one thing that most governments can rally around is they do not want a cryptocurrency society, except El Salvador, right? But most governments don't. And if you look at the history of money, which this is a fascinating book that I want to recommend. It's called Layered Money. I have a tiny little image of the book cover here. But this gives you a whole history of how money, the history of money in society. And he says worldwide demand for coins boomed due to their economic advancements, and governments became the largest supplier. But there was no reason for governments to really ever become involved in the game of money. It was only because rulers found it impossible to resist immortalizing themselves, right? Putting Caesar on the coin, minting coins in their names engraved with their faces to circulate as money within their borders. This wasn't, however, purely a form of regal vanity. Coin mints gave governments the power to use money to their own benefit, leading to lasting societal impact and the rise and fall of empires. Now, what does that mean? That means a government could say a gold coin is worth whatever, right? And then they could slowly reduce the amount of gold that was in that coin, or silver or nickel or whatever, and therefore give themselves money. This is how this happened. Likewise, now the dollar is something that the government can give itself more of. That cannot happen with a blockchain currency. It's impossible, right? And so do you think for a second that they are going to give up this power and let global cryptocurrency replace what is inefficient and unfair to us? Of course not. That's why we're already seeing behaviors like this. Check this out. This happened just last July, that New York officials ruled against a Bitcoin mining power plant because of climate goals. They're saying, oh, no, this will not. Like, if you really scrutinize what else New York was green lighting, but oh no, not Bitcoin, right? I'm sure that there were other banks that built new branches and that was totally A-okay, but not this. Yet this is just yet another example of the government picking on things it doesn't like, picking winners and losers according to how it benefits them, and now using climate change as a scapegoat. Yet in the face of this, Bitcoin is starting to rebound from its slump this year. This is a screenshot from the newsletter this morning. You get these every day if you
know what I would be
subscribe to
curious?
Redacted. What are you curious about?
I would be curious as to how Disneyland or Disney World holds up against that, like compares
Right. Yeah.
in their usage.
Well, when you talk about water too, like that's a whole other thing, the use of water. And
Well, I mean, we see that, you saw that in your gold story, like the use of water for extraction for gold and all,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, guys. We talk about, I know, Catherine Austin Fitz always talks about like cash is king. And I've kind of, I vacillate on that. I used to think, well, cash is the worst. If you're holding cash, it's losing value every day, right? The US dollar is losing value every day. If you're holding it in a savings account, right, you're up against inflation. So if you have a dollar in the bank, it's dropping in value. So is a euro. But I have to say, it's like, I don't know, to have that physical dollar, physical coins, physical gold, physical silver, that, in case of these collapses of these governments, these banks that shut down and won't let you get your money out of the bank. We see that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw, what was the country we featured the guy a few weeks ago? He ran in with a gun. Was it Lebanon, right? He went in.
I think.
Lebanon, and then of course we've had Greece run on the banks in Afghanistan. You go to get your money out, and they're like, we don't even have your money. Fractional reserve banking. We don't even keep your money here in this bank anyway. So I don't know.
It's sad when a vehicle holds more value than a dollar. Like they used to say, you drive a vehicle off a lot and it just drops in value.
It depreciates.
Yet the dollar's dropping. Yeah.
Well, now we saw used cars appreciating. Like, what in the hell weird world are we in the past 2 years? Used cars were appreciating in value. Like, what in the world kind of bizarro world are we in right now?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really interesting. Let us know in the chat if you guys are crypto investors, what you guys think about the Biden administration trying to take away crypto and clamp down on crypto mining.
Well, I, have read a lot about crypto, and I always sort of repeated this, like, oh yeah, it's really bad for the earth. It's very energy consumptive. But then when you actually look at what is bad for the earth compared to all the other things that we are actively using, like, okay, then we should all turn off our iPhones, right? Because we don't want to use cell towers, which is where most of the energy comes from, or the actual production of that kind of stuff. So anyway, I won't be repeating those White House lines anymore.
That's right.